Planeswalkers, and welcome back to another episode of the Hive Mind. My name is John, the show where I traverse the multiverse in search of other prominent members of the Magic the Gathering community. And before I say who is traversing in today, and boy, can I tell you, it is a prominent member, I'd like to tell you to stop over at a couple places. The first one being cardsphere.com. Cardsphere.com, the best place to buy, sell, trade your paper Magic the Gathering cards. Also, want to head on over to inkedgaming.com. You can order the custom playmats for this show right here, the Hive Mind and 10th Street Hooligans. Enter promo code HiveMindMTG to get your 10% off. Also, one of the best ways to support the show is now patreon.com. That just kind of adds to adding production value to the show and whatnot. But without further ado, planeswalking in from Roanoke, Virginia. You might know him from Commander Versus, streaming on Twitch as a member of Team Viper Brood, Assistant Marketing Manager of Starcity Games. We have Jeremy Noell. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
I've been, I think the first year that we've been doing this show, I used to bug you a lot to, hey, look at my show. And now, like, to have you on, it's a surreal feeling. So thanks for actually popping on the show.
Yeah, it was fun to be invited. I've definitely watched a couple of episodes. I know you prompted me a couple of times, but I caught a couple others just from people saying, "Hey, I did this interview," and they were all really cool. So I was very glad to accept your invitation.
But this is a beer for breakfast show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce your special guest for our beer for breakfast edition?
I went with a sort of breakfast beer with a little bit more of a kick. I actually am drinking a Founders KBS,
Nice.
Which is probably my favorite beer in the world. It's a Kentucky bourbon barrel stout, but it's made from a base of their what they call breakfast stout, which is an oatmeal chocolate coffee stout. And so they age it in bourbon barrels for about 6 months. And it was really hard to find for a long time because Founders is, despite having a broad reach, has actually only had like a very small setup until recently, until this last year or so. And they've expanded their barrel series, as they call it. And I was finally able to get more than one bottle here in Roanoke. So I was able to get a couple of 4-packs of this, and I'm very excited.
Nice. I think before I left Vegas, now I live in the Seattle area, but I think we were able to get like the Easy Rider sometimes. And now we get like the raspberry, Rauhaus or something. Rubius, thank you. Yeah. We get that up here, but I know that's Jason Alt's like favorite breakfast stout is the Founders one. So
yep.
Right here I have the Silver City Ripe and Juicy Double IPA. So it's grapefruity. I went the other side. I'm like, I could either go stouty, like a breakfast stout, or I could do like a grapefruity kind of IPA. And this one's an 8%er. This one's out of Bremerton, right over here in Seattle area. So nice 8%. It's got, let's see here, Pilsner malt, flake wheat, Citra, Amarillo, Azacca for the hops. And what they do is that they soak the hops in pineapple juice. So,
nice.
Yeah, we're going to see. I've never had a bad Silver City, so I'm looking forward to this one.
Never really been a big fan of the IPAs. Don't like the hops very much. More of a malty guy.
It took me a while, man. I think the one that did it for me was Ballast Point Grapefruit.
That one's actually pretty good.
It's so good. And then they got bought out, and now the quality's gone down, which is sad. But that was kind of the last like beer frontier for me was IPAs, and now I can't not drink them. They're so amazing. But yeah,
still can't do it.
So without further ado, sir, what is your Magic origin story?
Okay, so my Magic origin story, you may have heard this before, I don't know, but it's pretty similar to a lot of other people. It was my senior year of high school, and my friends and I just started playing. And that's, I think a lot of people have similar stories of like, I was in high school or junior high and I saw friends playing, or I had friends playing. The way mine worked was that it was the night before our senior class trip. And I'm from Michigan originally. So our senior class trip is we were just going to go to Cedar Point, which is at the northern edge of Ohio. It's actually on an island just off of Ohio's coast. And it's an amusement park, and we were all going to go there, and we were going to leave at like some ungodly hour, 5:30 in the morning or something ridiculous like that for this bus ride. And we all just decided, hey, instead of all of us waking up individually and driving over to the school, let's all just crash at our friend's house, Ricky. And we went over there, and he was like, hey, my older brother has all these magic cards. Does anybody want to learn how to play? We were like, yeah, sure, why not? So we all just busted out all these old cards, had no idea, like basically we're hearing the rules like second, third hand from Ricky, who had been taught from his older brother. So we were doing all the classic stuff of I play a Llanowar elf and that should go get me a forest, right? Because that's his tap, go, get a forest or whatever. Yeah. It's forest symbol. So we were doing that and just ended up playing the entire night, just as you do in high school, and played through the entire night, went to the bus without like any sleep at all, brought all our cards with us. We just played Magic on the bus, played Magic while we were hanging out and like, getting lunch and just hanging out at the amusement park, and then played a little bit on the way back. And yeah, it's been part of my life ever since. After that, I worked at Cedar Point for that summer and the local game shop there. I learned a lot from a couple people. One of the people that I actually learned a little bit from in a like kind of roundabout funny way was he lived a little bit further away than actual Sandusky, but one of the guys in Sandusky knew him, was actually Sam Stoddard.
Oh, wow.
Who was I believe one of the Ohio like higher ranked people at the time. And so we went over, did a draft with him, and then a couple years later I started working with him, and then he got a job at WotC. So it was very kind of weird roundabout thing.
I think around that time, that's when like Ruben Bressler was, because I know he's from Ohio. Was he kind of around Sam Stoddard at that time too?
I'm not sure, because this was about 2002 is when that happened. So I think Ruben might have been a little bit later than that. But I'm not sure exactly when his journey started, essentially.
Yeah, Sam Stoddard, his name always comes up. I heard he's just like a fantastic individual, and he's killing it since he's gotten to WotC. So yeah, it's someone that I would love to talk to too, because he's just responsible for it. It's like everyone that I talk to, especially over in that region, it's just like they have a Sam Stoddard story. So I'm like, this guy must be pretty cool.
Yep, it's Sam Stoddard, and because I was in Michigan, we used to play. When I was in college, our PTQs were at Pandemonium Games in just outside of Detroit, essentially in the Detroit area. And so the usuals that were hanging around that store when we went to do PTQs, because this was back when it was before the PTQ system and RPTQ system. And so there were like 300 person tournaments in that area. And it was like, Chapin and Ari Lax and those guys were always around there. So it was always a fun time too, when you're just like, hey, I made top 32 because never gonna break through this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's quite a insurmountable tide right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So what set do you remember that was kind of the new hotness that was out when you started playing?
When I first started playing, the new set was Torment. That was very first time I started playing. And so it was like Odyssey Torment, and I started playing with some friends then and just started learning about like type 2 and type 1 and stuff like that. Only really played competitively a couple of times. Drafted 7th edition a bunch. I remember that was a thing when I was there for the summer. And so it like most people, I got out of Magic for a little while. You never really quit. You just kind of stopped playing for a while.
Yeah.
So I stopped playing for a little while when I got to college. So I stopped a little bit after Mirrodin, I want to say. It wasn't really because of like the competitiveness or the standard, because I wasn't really playing standard. I was just playing casually with friends. But we just kind of stopped playing and did other things. We played a lot of D&D and stuff like that, and just were doing school. But then after a lot of my friends left and I was doing my 5th year, I kind of went on a track where I did 5 years of undergrad and then got into grad school. And that year, after a bunch of my friends started leaving because they got done with their college, I picked it back up, and that was around Lorwyn. And that's when I really got into it again and got a lot more competitive focused. And so it was around Lorwyn Morningtide when I first like really got back into the game and started focusing on it more.
With how involved you are on a day-to-day basis, probably like hour-to-hour basis with this game, how much well, like I know how much you're playing all the time, but what is your personal like favorite format and your favorite set of all time?
Well, I think a lot of people wouldn't be surprised that my favorite format is Commander. Uh, I've played a lot of different formats. I mean, I played, as I said, it was Type 2 when I was playing. I played some Legacy, a little bit of Vintage. I tried out Modern a little bit when it first started, but didn't really get into it.
What was it about Modern that you didn't like?
It was just more of it was a competitive format, and at the time that Modern came out, it was just after I started my job at Starcity Games, like probably within like a year or so, I think is when they introduced it. And so I just had stopped playing competitively because I was working on the job so much. I enjoy watching the format a bit, but it just I can't get into playing it anymore. Like I just can't dedicate the time, just like Standard, just like Legacy. I can't dedicate my time to making sure I do well at the format. So I don't really want to get invested in it. But yeah, I enjoy Commander, and Limited is actually one of my other favorite formats. I really enjoy still going to pre-releases and playing sealed. I used to draft a couple of times a week when I was in college, but kind of stopped after I got the job. I still drafted, probably it was like Innistrad a little bit after I got this job, so I drafted that a bunch and then kind of had to stop because of work, being on the road and all that stuff, and just wasn't able to dedicate the time to it.
So you haven't gotten a chance to really draft into the new Guild of Ravnica block at all?
A little bit. I do draft, but mainly online now. If I get to draft, I don't get to draft in paper as much anymore. So I've done a couple of drafts on Magic Online. I've definitely done a bunch on Arena now. Arena is a great way to just do a casual, like, hey, I want to draft. I want to get these games done real quick and just knock them out, So I don't have to dedicate 4 hours to playing an entire draft if I don't want to. So but as far as like my favorite set and stuff, it's kind of difficult. I really like Lorwyn still, and it's just one of those things where I got back into the game around that time. I started taking it seriously around that time, so it really holds a place in my heart. I really like the aesthetics of it, the whole world, like being a little bit more of a cutesy fantasy place rather than like a hard fantasy. And then beyond that, I still have really fond memories of Shards of Alara, Conflux, that era. I just really liked the idea of the different wedges, or the different shards at that time, and how it was like, hey, we're broken up into the 5 different ones. I obviously missed out on Ravnica, or else I'm sure that would have also been a really big. The original Ravnica would have been a really big influence on me too. So I didn't get to experience that until Return to Ravnica several years later.
Yeah, I heard like the whole Alara block was not something for the squeamish, just because there was so much going on. Where Ravnica, you do kind of have, I don't want to say it's on rails, because most of the time you are going to kind of find like a 3-color for you. So it's not just, you're not just a Rakdos, or you're not just an Orzhov. But I heard like Alara block was kind of just, I mean, you kind of had to know what you were doing. That was part of my, and Lorwyn as well. That was part of my kind of hiatus, like you alluded to earlier, where we all kind of jump off the train and then jump back on, multiple times, even though we swear we're done. We sell our collection, and then, they announce that another Ravnica set's coming out. I'm like, oh, you got me again.
Pretty much.
Jeez. But yeah, I love I do love the aesthetics of Lorwyn, and I do hope that we go back there. I like the whole turn where it went from, like you said, kind of beautiful fantasy art, Rebecca Gay, and then it goes to like more of your RK post looking Dark Crystal, turn. I think it's
Raymond Swanland and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Real sharp edges.
Can we start a Kickstarter to get Tony DiTerlizzi back to do art?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sure that Mike can make it happen.
Right? Mike, can we get on that, please? So what motivated you to, because it sounds, well, first, before we get there, your baby, as you said, as far as a format goes, has been Commander. who got you into that, and what's kind of your greatest hits as far as Commander picks go?
Well, I originally got into Commander. The very first time I played was actually when I was in college, and we saw some rumors online of this new Judge format, Elder Dragon Highlander, and they said, "Hey, here's how it's played," and it was very I wouldn't say early because obviously Sheldon and crew have been refining it for years and years and years at that point. Because at that point it was you can do whatever legend you want, and it wasn't just the original Elder Dragons and stuff. But we heard about it and we were like, hey, this sounds really cool. So we created a night where we could play a little bit, and that kind of went really well for the first little while, like some things do, and then kind of floundered out. But right after I got my job at Starcity Games, they introduced the first Commander product in 2011, because I started in June and then they came out with that in like August or whatever. And I was around a bunch of judges as well, because our organized play department is mainly made up of people who were certified judges. And so a lot of people were like, hey, we're going to be playing more of this. At the time, my roommate, which was our IT guy for the store at the time, who has since moved on, Matt, he was also like, hey, I'm a judge. I just bought all 5 of the precons. Do you want to play? Sure, why not? And we started playing. And within like a year, I had started building my own decks. And the big ones that I really focused on and started with was Maelstrom Wanderer. That was definitely my big one. My very first one that I had was Kalia of the Vast. I bought the precon, started tweaking it a little bit. And it was always one of those where even early on, people knew it was just a powerful card. So they started hating you out immediately and started killing your stuff immediately and killing Kalia. So I was like, well, this draws too much hate. It's whatever. I can play something that's big and dumb and do what I want because the game can take longer. So I made a Maelstrom Wanderer deck. That was my first like me deck that I really put a lot of effort into.
That's the most brutal fair deck ever. Like a tune Maelstrom Wanderer is like, oh, it's okay, and then it just starts going off. You're like, oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the game to not be one of those where you have like infinite combos and take infinite turns and stuff like that, because that gets boring. It's just like, hey, we get to like turn 10 and I'm going to play a card. I'm going to play my commander and have counterspell backup or whatever. And then I just win because I've stacked my deck into a way that I'm just going to get like Kiki and something, or I'm going to take infinite turns, or, something like that. And so I don't generally play those kinds of cards. I mean, probably the most unfair card in my Maelstrom Wanderer deck is like Deadeye Navigator, but I use it to pair it with just like silly stuff. Like I want to pair it with Muldrifter and just draw cards off of it, and like that is obviously an advantage and people will go after you for it, but it's not like I'm pairing it with my Kiki Jiki or my Zell's conscripts or whatever and just like infinitely blinking them and taking all your stuff and killing you with it. Like, it's not what I like to do with that one.
And like I said, like before, I've said this before, is sometimes you just have to have that the game has to end kind of card, no matter what kind of deck you're running, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just like we've been playing for 3 hours. People got to go home. People got to eat hot dogs. Boom, game's over. Good game, good game.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kalia was that initial. I still think about it, and they've printed some great runs for the precons. I think that was kind of WotC's best product line since it's come out. Maybe besides Commander 2018, but we won't go there. But as far as like that first run, those decks, man, were just so fantastic. They hit it out of the park with pretty much every single one. Even Zedru, and that card's weird.
I like Zedru a lot. I just love the aspect of, here, I give you a gift, and I'm going to hurt you for it.
Made Cursed Totem a thing, right?
Cursed Totem, stuff like that. Crone Warhearts and stuff like that.
Yeah, they put them on the Mirage pack for a reason. Everyone, you just had to wait. Or no, that was Steel Golem. Either way, it was a Zedru card. So what made you, play Commander, play all these formats? Like, hey, I really like this game, like quite a bit. And you said you went to grad school and everything. What kind of morphed that into wanting to take that into a career, going to Star Cities? How was that transition?
Well, my degree is in broadcast and cinematic arts, and I went to school for that. I got my BFA, my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Broadcast and Cinematic Arts from Central Michigan, and then it was around 2008 when I graduated. So we were, in the housing market and job market and stuff. So I was like, well, I could try and go find stuff. I could like go with my friends that are going to like LA or Chicago. I could probably get a room with one of them and try and find like a post house to work at or something like that. Cause I really like production and I really like editing, video editing and stuff like that. And I was like, nah, I'm going to eventually want to teach college. So I'm going to do the master's program. They basically just said like, hey, do you want to be a TA for video production? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Got into it and was like, this isn't exactly where I want to be. So never really finished my thesis, but went through my 2 years of GA. And after I got out of that, I was just kind of like trying to figure out some place to go. And I had about a year of like underemployment. I don't know what that term is again. It's like off the top of my head, I forget. But like I just was not working for the first like 5 or 6 months. I moved back in with my stepdad for a little while, and then I got a job like part time at like a GameStop and all that stuff, and was just kind of bumming around trying to like. I put in resumes at a bunch of different places. I didn't really want to do like news. Like local news is to me is basically in the broadcast world. It's very much like the fast food of broadcasting. Like I'm okay with doing it. I think I would be good at it. It's just not where I aspire to be. Like I want to do more than that. Like it's basically the thing where you're gonna get paid like the least amount of money. You're gonna be doing a ton of work that's grueling and thankless, and it's really important for the most part. Like a lot of that is like, hey, we're gonna bring you local news and stuff, but I just never really wanted to do it. So it wasn't my passion. And so it was about a year after I got done with school, and I was on Twitter, and Evan Irwin posted, hey, we're looking for a person to be a director/producer. I was like, hey, cool, this is something I could do. I am good at this stuff. I know Magic. It could be a really good way to combine the thing I went to school for and the thing I'm passionate about with one of my hobbies that I'm also passionate about. So I applied, and they were like, hey, we have a bunch of applicants. We want you to do like a demo reel, and here's this test thing. Did that, and Evan called me like a couple days later, and he was basically like, hey, you want the job? You were really good. I was like, yeah, obviously I want the job. So that's just kind of where it came about. It wasn't like something that I was super pursuing at the time. Like I wanted to do something like that, but I never imagined in a million years that it would just be like, hey, you're going to go have a full-time job at the company whose articles you've been reading for years and years and years for your hobby. So
that's awesome, man. That literally is kind of living the dream. And you've been there. You're one of the more longer tenured people with Star City. A lot of the greats have kind of come and gone. Like we said, Evan Irwin, Ruben Bressler, BBD. How was it like the experience of working with some of those guys in like the dawn of Magic content creation?
it was amazing, honestly. It was really, really cool. I mean, I was hired by Evan. He was my first boss at the shop. And it's one of those things where, I was watching the Magic show for a couple of years up to that point, and I knew it was just him making it in like his home for a while, and then he was doing it in Starcity Games for a while. And I got there, and he was just like, "Hey, you're going to be working on the Magic show," and I was like, "Oh, cool! Like this is like one of the formative things that was like Magic video content." And now I'm going to be actually like editing it and helping direct it and stuff like that. Like that was awesome. So that was really cool. Evan kind of came up with the idea of like the Versus series as it is. Like obviously I've helped morph it throughout the years, but he came up with the initial like, hey, we've got like these dual decks. We want to help sell them. It's this new product. Chapin's going to be in town for a little bit. Let's have him battle somebody and we'll just record it. And I was like, yeah, all right, cool. And we recorded it with like our road stuff that we were using for the SCG tour at the time, SCG live stuff, and that kind of developed into the Versus series. And then you just get more and more people, and it's one of those things where it's hard to still not be starstruck by certain things, even years and years later. because like the very first couple of weeks, you know, like I met Evan Irwin and I was like, this is really awesome. And then within a few weeks, I went to Seattle to work one of our events, and Brad Nelson was going to be one of our commentators at that point. And I was like, oh my God, I get to meet Brad Nelson, who just was like working, you know, he was just like the player of the year. And he like, Rich Hagan just wrote a book about him and like all this stuff. And I meet him and he's just the biggest goofball you could ever imagine. And he's a great guy. And like all the stuff you see of him on like Twitter and social media and on the Versus series, that's genuinely who he is. He's a little bit louder. He tries to be a little bit more of a character on the Versus series, but yeah, he's like, he's just a genuinely good guy. He tries hard at like everything he does. And I was super starstruck. And then I was like, all right, we got to do this. And then, well, you know, it's years later. And now I'm just like, Brad, sit in the chair, shut up, do this, you know. But yeah, even then, like it's still just amazing sometimes when you get to do these things and meet these people. And I as soon as it gets boring to me, I know that's when I need to hang up my hat and go do something else. So
nice. Yeah, I felt the same way when I pegged BBD for one of these, and I was just like, I've been following BBD since the beginning. He won a world championship. I didn't even think he was going to respond to me reaching out, and then just doing the interview. He is just so cool and laid back, and
yeah,
just like really funny too. And yeah, it's incredible that how humble some of these people that have accomplished so much in this game and in life and all that. I mean, it's refreshing to see, and it's mostly on that kind of side. Like everyone in that kind of camp has this kind of like everyone seems to gel really well, and it comes forward in the content on camera and just in the interaction. So it's pretty great to see. So I sent out a tweet recently for the asking content creators who was their top 5 influencers in content creation. You listed Loading Ready Run and Evan Irwin, also some high school and college friends. Can you, now that I have you on here, can you elaborate a little bit on that list?
Sure. So I tried to kind of go through like a timeline situation. It's difficult for me to like peg down specific people in content creation because there are so many people that do such good work. So I was trying to do the ones that like were major influences and turning points in my life, because I'm still influenced every day by the works of people like the Professor and like Wedge and Sam and all those guys, just because they put out so much content and so much high quality content. So I tried to do kind of a timeline thing of where I started and where I am now. So my first one was my friend who his online handle is Fruit Spread, and his name's Jess, and he was a really close friend in high school, and we actually ended up going to college together. And that's kind of where I started with content creation. Basically, we would just sit around and be like, hey, this is really funny. Like we play D&D. He was our DM. He was one of the guys who I started playing Magic with and stuff. And it basically like, hey, we want to make like a video. And so we would just go grab the old VHS camcorder and make a stupid video and plot it out. And then like our first videos were very obviously the like, okay, that was a bad take, we have to rewind, and you had to do it all in chronological order because we didn't have any nonlinear editing. We just all had to do it right on the tape. So we did that stuff, and any excuse that we could in high school to make a video, we did. So there were projects like our friend Bill had an art class when he took like Art 3 in high school. We did a video for that. That was his final project. Our physics class was just like, our teacher was just very much like hey, whatever you want to do is your last thing. You can do a presentation, you can do whatever. And we're like, can we make a video? He's like, yeah, you just got to give me the script beforehand. Like, okay, cool. And we made a video about a world without friction in like,
nice.
Yeah, trying to explain what friction was. And, had like the helper guy, the helper professor who would pop in suddenly. And I played the kid who was being a victim of a world without friction. And so it was one of those situations where just like it kind of snowballed from there of, we did a bunch of videos. We went to college together. When I got into college, Jess, my friend, also was in college with me, and we did some theater stuff as well. And when we got into college, our college, Central Michigan, had a really robust broadcast branch as well. And we were like, okay, cool. This is something we could do. We tried out for a TV show at the time. I made it on. He got like a smaller part, and we both helped out with the production of the show as well. And it was a show that was originally produced by some of the people that I mentioned in there as well. A guy named Dave Seeger, another guy named Del Shootman was one of the other actors on the show with me, and a guy, Tom Kaufman, was one of the regular writers. And there were a bunch of other people. And they all influenced me because it was one of those where they said, yeah, if you want to help work on this, or if you want to come and be like a script supervisor on parts you're not doing, or help edit or do some other stuff. And like, I ended up making the intro for like our season 2 and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. And it's just really cool because a lot of those guys have gone on to do like really, really great things. Dave Seeger, who was the producer and like one of the directors of the show, was involved with a website called Channel 101 for a long time. And that was through that he met people like Dan Harmon, and he worked on the first season of Community. He's actually got a bit part in the first season of Community. There's an episode where they watch a bad movie called Kick Puncher, and he's actually he's like the drug dealer in Kick Puncher. And so it's just like really cool. He gets to do this. Tom Kaufman works on Rick and Morty as a writer and now producer. And then Del Shootman he's like the wildest wild card I know. He dropped out of college to go follow his friends, like with like a semester or a year's worth left, went to go follow Dave and some other people to LA, randomly got a job on the Ellen Show, quit the Ellen Show by just not showing up and taking pictures of him at Disneyland. and his bosses are all just like, we see your Facebook posts, you're at Disneyland. He's like, oh yeah, I don't want to work there anymore.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then like 3 months later, he meets Bear Grylls randomly, hooks up with him, like starts working with him a lot. And now he's like the producer for all of the Bear Grylls shows, both in the US and in England, and has 2 BAFTA awards. Like this guy who I knew in college, who I'm like, I have seen you just like as drunk as a skunk, and you have BAFTAs. Like, how does that happen?
That is insane.
Yeah, so those are my high school and college stuff. Loading Ready Run was actually more of an influence because it was really one of those where I didn't realize it at the time because I wasn't following them exactly, but I was into Penny Arcade a lot in college as well. And so I was looking at a lot of their stuff. I went to like a lot of the first PAX Easts. And then I was watching, they had a show on there called Checkpoint, and it was on the Penny Arcade website, and I really enjoyed it. And I didn't realize at the time that that was Loading Ready Run, but I watched it all the time, and I was like, man, this is something that I could do, that I don't have to do like news or work in a major production company or work at a production house or an edit shop or whatever. I could just do my own thing. I could work with a website like this or something. And so that influenced me a lot. And I found out much later, obviously, that they're this bigger group as far as internet videos goes, and started following their stuff. And that inspired me a lot. Obviously, Evan, as I talked about, being like one of the first Magic video series with the Magic Show, that inspired me a lot because it was like, oh, hey, you can just do video about your hobbies. So that was another really, really big one for me. And then I cannot remember who the 5th one I listed was.
I think you covered them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, now I want to see a sitcom about a guy that just kind of drinks all the time and stumbles into all these like crazy jobs, like working for Ellen. And, oh my! Like, I want to see that show now. So we need.
You're right. He had a picture that was in Rolling Stone that he took of Bear Grylls and President Obama.
What?
Like, yeah, Obama showed up in this like one of the episodes of like Running Wild with Bear Grylls, where it was in, right? Yeah, it was like in an Alaska like preserve. And he shows up while he was still president and was like, hey, we have to do these things to conserve our forests and conserve our blah, blah, blah. And Dell just took a picture, and that picture ended up in Rolling Stone. And it's like...
Yeah, right. It's like he like trips and breaks his leg, but he looks down and it's like $1 million bar of gold or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, geez. All right. Well, scaling it back, we're going to work on this, off air, get the production ready on that show.
Yeah.
But until then, we'll continue this. Scaling back to the Versus series, I started watching it back in the Darby or McDarby, sorry, versus West, BBD versus CVM days, Ollie Andrazi, Todd Anderson, all that. Tell me about the evolution of the show. You've seen it from day one to where it is now, and now you're a core member of a core on-camera member of the series. Just talk about the evolution of that show.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said before, it started really when Evan was like, hey, we need some new content. I think we could do some really cool things. We just have to do this kind of correct. And he's like, we could do these on-camera playtest sessions. And they originally just called playtest. And so we started off with just some people who happened to be in Roanoke at the time. They came out every now and then people started coming to Roanoke because they wanted to work for Starcity Games, content creators. And so they started showing up, and we had like the very early days of like BBD versus CVM and stuff like that. And the show just kind of evolved from an out of the way place in the back of the office to we had like a small space in the storefront for a little while. And then eventually we just built a small studio in the store because we were like, we're going to keep doing this stuff. We got to have a space for it so that it doesn't get interrupted all the time. And just recorded what we had at the time. And it just kept developing and developing. And yeah, it's been really amazing. Actually, the guy who I told you about from high school, Jess, I helped him to get a job at Star City for a while. And he actually helped to kind of come up with a way to shoot the 4-player Commander versus. And he was in the very first episode with CVM and McDarby and Danny West, the first 4-player episode of Commander versus. And so after a while, we needed like a more consistent stable of people because McDarby eventually left to go work at Wizards of the Coast. Danny left and he went to go he just wanted to move back to his hometown originally. Now he's in Philadelphia. And so it kind of evolved from there. And so Parnell and Stephen Green started playing a little bit more. And we realized if we're going to do Commander, it has to be 4-player. It can't just be 2-player. That was just what we had at the time. And it evolved and became, Justin plus Stephen plus John plus Westwise. And then eventually John had to step away for a while. And I was like, well, I can step in. That's fine. I've played Commander. I don't mind the hours and all that stuff and the work that we have to put into it. So I stepped in, and then eventually Wes had to leave and John came back because he was over the reason why he had to leave in the first place. And so it's been just a pleasure just being on the show now and not just behind the camera and being in front of the camera because of that. So.
Absolutely. And my personal introduction to you specifically was through what I consider still one of my favorite Magic shows of all time, and that is the Split Second series. It literally broke my heart when you announced that was ending. Obviously, for selfish reasons, I happen to be featured on it twice, but...
Speaking of Commander, YouTube channel They Said We Said has partnered up with the Card Bazaar to host the Content Creators Cup. In an announcement video today, hosts Jon Dunning from They Said We Said and Coach from the Card Bazaar go down the list of the 8 players that are participating. In the newest episode of Pop Culture Podcast, The Hive Mind on the They Said We Said YouTube channel, host John sits down with Jason Alt, the co-host of Brainstorm Brewery and content manager for EDH Rec. Alt goes over how he originally got into Magic Finance and the Brainstorm Brewery podcast, how he got into writing articles about Commander, and the rise of EDH Rec from a bot to a site that he manages content for.
Put the links in the descriptions below. But no, it was just a fantastic series, and there was nothing really like it. It was very, like you said, it was news, but it was done so well. I love that show so much. What was as much as you could say, what was the decision to end that series?
It basically came down to just how much work we've had to put into the show versus how much it was viewed on a regular basis, because obviously at the end of the day, we're a business and we have to think about how much time it takes to do something and how much money it takes to do something versus like how much we're getting out of it. And it doesn't seem like a lot because the show is only like we were aiming for it to be anywhere between like 4 and 7 minutes most of the time. Sometimes it went a little longer, especially during preview season, because I would actually like talk about all the preview cards and where they came from, and I would say what was on them. I felt like it's not great for people to just list, like basically say what's on a card. But with this show, I felt it was necessary because I felt a lot of this was going to be, I'm going to hit play on this 5-minute recap video and just listen to the words, and I'm maybe not going to watch it. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I also just wanted to make sure that people who may have had like some sort of impairment, might not be able to watch the show, can at least listen to it. So I would list off what was on the cards as well. And so there would be these episodes anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes, and people wouldn't realize that it takes like hours to do that. It takes hours and hours and hours to make that show every day. The show would start off with me coming in and starting to do research, and a couple of the other directors and stuff would also kind of help out with research. And then I would write the show at like noon, and then we would film it at 1, and then it would be edited to try and be out the door between like 4 and 6. And it was never really consistent because it depended on how long the video was, when we could actually get it to be exported and stuff like that. So it was really just one of those things where it took anywhere from 6 to 8 hours to produce. And that's a lot of time when you think about it, for more than one person to be working on a show that's not getting that many views. We were getting like a decent amount of views, but compared to other stuff on our channel, it was difficult to kind of justify keeping it going. So we got to go about 2 years, which is really good. Honestly, I really, really enjoyed being on the show and working on the show. And I'm surprised that we were able to get a full 2 years out of that. But yeah, eventually we got to the point where we're like, yes, this just isn't doing what we thought it was originally going to do, and it's not growing. So we probably just can't continue to put the resources into it that we want to. So we stopped doing that show, but that helped us to put the resources into other things like Flashback, and we were able to do more with like the Versus series and Commander Versus. We've just went to live this year with Versus, and we were able to redo our set and stuff like that. So a lot of that time and energy was put into more stuff like that.
Sure, and what a great segue into talking about Flashback. You're credited with the opening sequence, but how involved are you with that show on a day-to-day basis?
On like a day-to-day basis, almost zero. I'm very hands-off. I would typically say it's more of what you would consider like an executive producer role, where I kind of oversee it and make sure that it's kind of staying on task. But I'm not actually like in the room as much anymore. I'm not really involved with any of the stuff. Like Nick Miller does a lot of the research for it. He's great at it because he has just this such an awareness of all the individuals and knows like a lot of their tournament stuff and a lot of their big moments. And he goes through and finds all of these pictures of them, before, and not just their Magic life, but their personal stuff as well. And I have a wonderful group of directors and editors who will set up the studio, make sure everything's good, film it, run the whole thing, and then edit the whole thing so that it's a really nice cohesive unit. Sometimes those interviews can go on for an hour plus, and they cut them down to 20 minutes and just take the best stuff, So yeah, like day to day, I'm kind of hands off. To start off, I was making sure that pilot episode was as good as it could be. So I was like involved with a lot of stuff and kind of directing everybody like, hey, this is what you should be doing. We should try and edit it like this. We should do these kind of things. And I helped to make the intro and the graphics and stuff like that a little bit. Our graphic designers obviously did a wonderful job on a lot of that stuff, but I kind of helped to make the intro by getting templates and kind of adjusting them to how we needed them and figuring out stuff. And it's when you get a template for After Effects or something, it's never just type in the name and then go. It's always okay, I got to figure this out. And it's a days and weeks process because
Sure.
you just got to figure out what somebody else is doing. So
yeah, I mean, it's just admittedly, I'm a little frustrated with SCG content because I understand it's a business. You guys need to sell the cards and do the tournament coverage. That's what most people go there for. But you guys are just so damn good at everything else, like the ancillary content, like the newsing and all that stuff. Split second, of course, a flashback is great. All that stuff is so great. So when you guys put out content like that, I hold it near and dear because I never know when you guys are going to rip it from my dead clutches. So
yeah, it's unfortunate, but sometimes you just kind of have to do that. It is a business at the end of the day.
I get it. So aside from SEG keeping you very, very busy, you also find time to stream on Twitch and your personal YouTube channel. How's that experience been? And you're actually working with Team Viper Brood. So tell me a little bit about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, it was a little over a year ago at this point. I think I started in September or October of 2017. I believe is when I started. And I had my 1 year stream anniversary this last year. So that was exciting. But yeah, I decided that I wanted to do a little bit more streaming personally because I had a lot of blunders last year at this point, it'd be 2 years ago. In 2016, I had a lot of blunders on the Commander Versus series, just like really big mistakes. And it's mainly to do with the fact that that's one of the only times I get to play Magic, and I am not familiar with a lot of older cards as much as the other guys. So sometimes I'll just do something and it'll be like a really big problem. And so I decided I want to get better at the game. And I was like, what's a better way to do it than obviously just having people hang out and call you out on all your misplays. So I decided to start streaming, and I started off by just doing like 1-ticks Commander on Magic Online. 1-tick's roughly equivalent to $1. And I was like, there's a lot of really cheap cards. So I started doing 1-ticket decks, and that led into our current one that we do all the time, which is 3DH, which is kind of developed and regulated by another group called Praetor Magic. And we work on that quite a bit. And so I do that a lot. And it was a little bit after I started that Gabby Sparts actually started the Viper Brood stream team. And it was probably like 3 or 4 months after I had started. And she's like, hey, we're starting this stream team. And the whole point is positivity. We want people who are going to help each other out, who are going to be positive in their streams. We don't want negativity. We want to really lift each other up. Like the whole point of the group is we want to focus on making our streams like a place where people can come hang out, have fun, and not worry about like people bashing them as much. And we want to help each other out as well too. So I applied and I was like, hey, I don't think I have enough viewers and followers to get into this, but I'm going to apply because I'm really excited about it. I like the concept. I like Gabby. She does good work. And she emailed back and she was like, oh, we'd love to have you. This is like so cool. And I was like, oh, you know who I am. Okay, cool. So I was like, you're a really big streamer. I don't know what to say about this. And so they accepted me into the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they accepted me into the group. And yeah, we just talk a lot. Like we converse online about like ways we can improve our stream. We talk about like when people come up with, hey, I want to like get a new mic, or I'm building a new computer, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, or I want to play this game, or I want to do that. We like a lot of people will chime in with like, here's a good mic, here's this, here's what I do to like, do certain things with like OBS or streaming software. And so it's really about positivity and helping each other out. And we always like rate each other when we're at the end of a day. We're just like, hey, go follow this person because they're actually super cool too. Like, even if it's not a game that you usually play, like obviously people come to my stream for Magic, but I'm like, pass it off to this person who plays like Pokemon or Monster Hunter or something like that. And you're just going to enjoy yourself being part of their stream because they're all such, like positive people and bright personalities. So that's how I got into that.
That's awesome. I like the my favorite ones are when you're doing the jammies. That one's a good time.
Yeah. Got the Twitch onesie, and I really enjoyed playing with that.
And early in 2018, you did Peeps and Tab charity stream in support of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. How was that experience, and what made you choose that specific charity?
So Peeps and Tab is kind of a joke from college. I've explained this during the actual broadcast, but in college, my friends and I think it was freshman or sophomore year, we were all sitting around and we were like, man, I really want to go get snacks, but the student convenience store is a whole block away and I have to walk over there. So one of our friends was like, oh, my mom sent me a care package. It's full of Peeps. And at the time, I think it was Halloween. So there was full of like the Halloween Peeps, the ghosts and pumpkins and stuff. And another one of the roommates was just like, hey, I remember loving Tab soda when I was in high school. And so I bought a 12-pack, and he cracked one open and drank like 2 sips of it and was like, hey, you guys can have the rest of this if you want. We're like, yeah, the water fountain is all the way down the hall, so I guess we'll just drink this. And then we watched the original Dungeons and Dragons movie with Jeremy Irons and
Marlon
Damon Wayans.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, yeah, I guess it was like Damon Wayans Jr. or something. Like, I can't remember who it was.
Marlon Wayans, right?
Marlon Wayans, yes, that's who it was. Marlon Wayans and Thora Birch, I believe, was in it as well. Yeah. So it was, and we were like, man, this is bad. And we were just eating Peeps. And obviously after like 1 or 2, you start to get sick. And we were drinking this Tab artificial 80s soda. And we were like, this is just like the worst idea we've had. And then a year later, we were like,
yeah, oh my God,
let's do it again. So that became our bad movie night, was our Peeps and Tab night, where we'd all sit around, watch a bad movie, eat Peeps, drink Tab, and celebrate it. Eventually, it got to the point, obviously, where we were drinking, mixing our Tab with other adult beverages. And it became bigger and bigger and bigger, and it became a party that was like a yearly tradition, or sometimes once a semester tradition. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to bring this back because it's a way to kind of like torture myself. And I know that people on Twitch like to watch you do things that are torturesome to yourself. So I'm just going to like do this. I know it's the worst thing ever. So I was like, and I'm going to do this as my charity stream. And I really wanted to do a charity stream at some point, at least like once a year is what I was aiming for. Because I wanted to benefit something. And the charity I chose was the Association for Suicide Prevention. And the reason why I chose that is actually because I lost my mother to suicide when I was about 20 years old. It was a little bit after my freshman year of college, and my sophomore year, I actually ended up staying at home and doing some community college, because I was like, okay, I'm just going to stay home. I'm going to work at this. I'm going to go to this community college, get some of my credits, and then go back. And that fall, my mother took her own life. She overdosed, and it really hit me hard. And it's been one of the big things that has affected my life for the last, 15 years. Is just because you never know. Sometimes you're going to have somebody that's really close to you, and the next moment they could be gone. And it could be accidental. It could be self-inflicted, and you just don't know. And I didn't realize at the time. And I posted a long tweet about this during National Suicide Awareness Month, or National Mental Health Month, I think it was, a few months ago. And I didn't realize at the time that my mother was suffering from bipolar disorder. I didn't realize until after after she took her life. And she was bipolar, and she also had a little bit of depression as well. And she was taking pills, and it would be one of those where I didn't realize until, I reflected on it, that I did realize that she was taking pills for something, and, that her mood would be better when she was. And then, just like I know a lot of people who suffer from depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder, they get to that point where they feel better about themselves, and then they'll stop taking their pills. And then they will go back because it is a disease and there's not really anything you can do about it. So they'll go back to having these like anxiety attacks, or suffering from depression, or suffering from bipolar disorder. And I was like, you know, that's the thing that means a lot to me, is trying to help people in those situations. And it's difficult for me because I don't like to talk about things that I don't understand. And I can't wrap my head, because I don't suffer from those kinds of things. I can't wrap my head around what it must be like for people who do. Sure. So I try and help people in ways that I can, which is like, hey, let's donate to these charities, to these organizations that will get those people the help that they need. They'll get those people like access to psychiatrists or access to the medication they need. Even like, you know, just helplines that are there for them all the time. So I have tried to help out with that as much as I can throughout the years because of that. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Having lost a parent, my father struggled with mental illness his entire life, and a year ago, this last December was when he finally succumbed to this disease, and it just hit really close to home when you said people that are afflicted with this affliction, for lack of a better term, when they do feel better, they do go off their meds and they start kind of almost hiding it from people, and that's part of the disease. And I've, you know, one minute I have a normal conversation with my father on the phone. He was schizophrenic and manic depressive, and then the next I had to fly. You know, I'm flying out to Texas because he's in a schizophrenic coma. Because he stopped taking his meds, and or would, you know, my stepmother would give him the meds and he'd find a way to dispose of them or something. So yeah, I always try to put as much of an awareness on that type of thing because of how I've grown up around that. So I'm sorry to hear that. First of all, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. It's got to be terrible, because I know this last December, I was just, man, it hit me hard. My mom's been gone since 2010, but which still affects me. But losing my father now, to finally, you know, a struggle like that just kind of broke me this last month. So yeah, and during this whole segment, as you see, I put the hotline on the screen. So, you know, if yourself or anyone is afflicted by this, please, there is plenty of places for help, and that one right there, the hotline is a good place to start. So we're just gonna kind of to move on a little bit. So before we get into the game, we're gonna do a Face the D20. What are your long-term plans for your own content?
That's kind of a difficult question, because I don't typically plan long-term for my personal stuff. It's hard for me because I put so much of myself into all the work I do.
Sure.
That for like my personal stream, the things that I want to do is just continue to have fun and play Magic. Honestly, it's good to set goals, but it's difficult for me when I make resolutions for like the new year or whatever, or for certain goals, and I'm just like, I want to get to X subscribers, or I want to get to X things, or I want to make partner. Like, I have no illusions that I'm going to make partner on Twitch just through my own merit, because I'm not going to dedicate the time I need to get to that point. Like, I just understand that. Like, there's other things in my life that take priority over it. It's not my full-time job. Like, all the people who do that are wonderful, and it's great that they can make their own, you know, that they can make their living off of this kind of thing. You know, you see people like that who that's their full-time job, and it's like, that's awesome. I love it. I'm glad that you have goals. But for me, it's just something that I can do to hang out, have fun, and I can only do it so much, because I do work 40 plus hours at Starcity Games, and I'm also trying to balance like spending time with my wife as well, and doing other things. So I like, for me, some of the goals that I want to do for this next year is more of, instead of like, I want to hit this milestone or I want to do that, is things like, I've been talking about wanting to do a vlog for a while. I want to do a vlog from an event I go to, and stop like getting in my own way of trying to do that. Every time I start to do it, I'm just like, nobody's going to watch this, or it's going to take so much effort to do. And I'm just like, I understand everybody has a camera in their pocket nowadays, you know, like I can do this. I just have to. And I go to so many of these events that like people don't have the opportunity to, that I just want to show them like, hey, here's what I do at these events. Like I said, I started going to PAX East like in 2010, and that was like the very first convention I went to. I was like, these are amazing. I want to show other people what it's like to be at them, and maybe that'll influence them to go to one that's near them, because they're very cool. And it's just a really cool space to hang out and play games with other people that have similar mindsets most of the time. So that's like one of the big things I want to do, is make a vlog of an event I go to. I want to do more stuff for the people who are subscribed to me and are Patreons of my channel. Is just like, I don't feel like enough unique content for them. So I want to start doing things like, you know, like more deck techs just for that group, or like put stuff on YouTube that is unique to YouTube. Because right now my YouTube is just archives of my Twitch stream. And I want to make stuff that's like, here's this deck tech, or here's this, like, we're going to build around this card or something like that, and post it to those people first, to all the people who support me, and then, you know, post it to the public later. So there's things like that that I want to do, but there's not really any like, I want to hit this number, or I want to do this, because those things don't really mean as much to me, you know, like as long as people are hanging out, having a good time, and enjoying themselves while watching, that's what really makes me happy. And that's the reason why I produce content, is because I just feel like I want people to enjoy things, and I always get joy when they enjoy the things that I make, and I'm okay at making video stuff. So that's my medium, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're underselling yourself a little bit, Jeremy, because I think your stuff is fantastic with SEG and with your own personal content. But this is the very first time since I've launched a Patreon that I have a patron question. And if you are one of the patrons for this channel, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And at the certain level, you get to ask a question on one of the shows. So this particular patron is Rafael Garcia. So thank you for your question, sir. And I'm going to read it to you now. It's kind of a long one. We know the Magic community is a diverse one that tries to appeal to everyone interested in playing this game we love. And while this is strong, there's a strong push within the community to bring us all together and share in this game we love. There are those that seem to want to poison the well, ruining the game, particularly for those that are just being exposed to it. What one or two things do you think, Jeremy, every Magic player should have or do to help foster this community into a positive and nurturing place for new and established players?
That's a good question. I think some of the big things that I've and like, it's difficult for me to come at this from an angle of I know exactly what I'm talking about, because I don't. Like, I readily admit, when I was in high school and early in college, I was one of those like edgy kids who I was like, I'm going to say something to insult you, or, you know, like sometimes I would be kind of a gatekeeper. Like, you can't play this game because it's for nerds and you're not a nerd. And then eventually I realized it's a game. Like, why should I be keeping people out of it? It's for enjoyment. It's for fun. And I think it was one of those where I kind of took it from high school as like, you know, the whole like clique system. I was in a really small school. So it was like, all right, I'm not going to really be as much friends with like the football players, and like people are going to make fun of me because of my upbringing or something. So I was always very much that, like, I'm going to push you out of my nerdy stuff because you're not allowed to be here. So I think that's honestly one of the ways that you can foster some inclusiveness in the community, is just realize that it is a game. It is not a way of life. It is not like, for some people, obviously they can make a living at it, but at the end of the day, it is something that is meant for people to come together to enjoy. And it's not something for people to exclude others from. If you're the kind of person who is going to constantly be negative, like, you should probably reevaluate things. and there are some people who are going to constantly be negative because it gets them attention, and that's what they like to do. So, but try and foster an air of positivity. Like one of the things that I do when trying to like interact with people who have never really played the game before, or like when I go to pre-releases and I sit down across from a person who's like, yeah, this is my first time I've ever played in paper. Like I played a little bit with like my friends, or I've played like online, but this is the first time I've ever gone to a store. I'm always like, all right, cool. Well, what do you like about the game? You know, I ask them questions. What are you doing? What do you like? And then, you know, depending on how the game goes, sometimes I'll be like, oh, your deck's really cool. Can I see the rest of your, or do you mind if I look at the rest of your pool? Do you want a hand? You know, like, would you like some help? I try not to be demeaning about it. I ask genuinely, like, I want that person to be better at the game, because when you get to build the things that you like to build, or you see synergies for the first time, it really clicks and it brings that light to your eyes. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is just realize that everybody is new at some point and might not realize, you know, that the game can be so deep, because you have to help those people out to understand that the game can be that deep, and that it can be that complex and stuff like that. It is very much like one of the most complex games you can play. And so some people, and especially now that we have like Arena and people are coming into the game in paper for the first time, you're going to have people at your LGS that are going to be coming in for the very first pre-release, or their very first paper tournament, their very first draft. And they're going to know some of what's going on, but they're not going to have that social aspect of it down, because all they're going to get is like those 6 emotes as far as interacting with other people on the other side of the screen, you know? So you really have to kind of help them out and be like, hey, that's really cool. Why, you know, like, what are you doing? Like, what's your favorite guild to draft? What's your favorite format? What's your, you know, like, how are you playing this? What's your favorite deck, you know? But don't like try to ask the like too simple questions, you know? Don't be like, you know, like, I can't even think.
That's the color blue. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that that's color blue? You know, you can play that at instant speed, right? Like, that's why. And like, don't try and demean them. Like, just come up with an air of positivity. Come up with like, it's really cool that you're trying to learn this game that we all love and play constantly. And I want to help you enjoy the game more, rather than just being like, I'm going to teach you how to play correctly, you know? And that's probably some of the biggest things I can say.
I think there's something huge to be, you know, I think you hit it out of the park, where this game is better when more people are playing it, right? It's
yes.
like it seems so counterproductive that certain people or certain groups, whatever, just like, nope, this is my thing. It's my precious, you know, back off. I don't want any more. It's like, no, everyone, the game thrives because that means more resources and time and love and people, and it creates opportunities across the board, whether you're just buying your first starter pack or you're the CEO of WotC or whatever, you know, across the board, it helps everyone to be more inclusive to every type of style of life. But yeah, so let's jump right into it. We're kind of up against it, so we'll just do a couple rolls. We're bringing it back this week. Face the D20. So this is the game where Jeremy's going to roll his spin down, and every number on the spin down represents a non-Magic the Gathering related question. So we get to know a little bit more about the man behind the card. So, sir, are you ready?
I am. I have my D20 out of my box of D20 spin downs. So.
Nice. Fire when ready.
All right. I have a 7.
Number 7. If you could tour with any musical artist, who would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. If I were to go on tour with anyone, I feel like I would want to say Paramore, because they have, like, from what I've seen of their concerts and stuff, they have like this hugely positive energy, and Hayley Williams constantly seems to just bring like this huge, like, she's just one of the best front women like that I've seen in live concert, if we're talking current. And I think that would be very, very cool. I also think it would be very cool just from a personal, like liking their music a lot too, is Coheed and Cambria.
Oh, my man.
I love watching their stuff. And also, if you haven't seen it, Ristic Studies, Sam, he does a separate channel of guitar covers, and he does amazing covers of Coheed stuff. But that's another band that I would love to just tour around with for a while.
Absolutely. I know I've said this before, but I don't know if you've heard this, but I used to base, when people would make me be DM when we play Dungeons and Dragons, because I'm not very good at that game at all, I would base them all the campaigns off of Coheed and Cambria songs.
Nice.
I thought they were a blast. No one knew what was going on, but it's just like the whole scenario was based on like everything evil, and people had a good time. I was playing with some pretty entrenched players who were like, this is the most bizarre but kind of fun time I've ever had playing. I'm
yeah,
like,
that's awesome. Yeah. I imagine a campaign setting based on the Amory Wars would be a pretty big hit. Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Yeah, we need to maybe email Watsy and be like, hey, get on this. All right.
Chase Stone did their artwork for the most recent album that they did, the Vaxis.
Yeah, it was Chase Stone.
Chase Stone, yeah, he did Audric and there's a couple other really big ones that he did. Trostani, I believe he did. Yeah. So he's a magic artist that got to do all the artwork for their newest album.
I want to say Chippy did the artwork for the Apollo.
Oh, nice.
Graphic novel. They had a graphic novel that came out.
Yeah, the Amory Wars graphic novel. That's sweet.
I believe that was Chippy that did it, which I don't think he does magic art anymore, but yeah, it was fantastic. We could talk about this is a whole other podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, sir.
All right, am I doing another one here?
Yes, please.
All right. 20 nat crit. Yeah.
If you had to get stuck in an elevator for 8 hours, besides immediate family, who would you choose to be stuck with?
Ooh, that's a good question. Can't count my wife, so.
Right, yeah.
If I were to be stuck with someone for 8 hours,
You're like Claudio Sanchez.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of somebody who I would like close friends and stuff. It might be somebody like Justin Parnell, just because he's a very calculated kind of person. And I think if it would be one of those things where we would try and figure out ways to get out, and if we couldn't, we would just pass the time in other ways. Like other people that I work with would be like Director Kyle. I think he'd be very calm under pressure. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of people I actually know, because it's hard to like, I know that this is supposed to be one of those things where you're like, oh, I want to get stuck in an elevator with The Rock for 8 hours. And like, honestly, everything I've seen about Dwayne Johnson is like, he's a super cool dude. He's super chill. Like all of his public stuff, he's a very, very cool guy. But you just never quite know a person just based on their like media appearances. So
let me tell you, someone that's met The Rock, there wouldn't be room in the elevator. You would just,
he's a huge dude, right?
The man is like, I thought, because I met like Tom Cruise and Sylvester Stallone, like standing next to each other. They are like half people. They are so tiny. And then I saw The Rock, and he is like 3 times the size in real life that he is on screen. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's the last person I'd want to be in the. He's a sweetheart. But he's the last person you want to be stuck with in an elevator. Let me tell you. Let's go one more time.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, 12.
Number 12. This one comes up a lot. What's the number one thing on your bucket list?
On my bucket list?
Yeah.
I would say if it's not taking my wife for a vacation in London, because it's difficult for me to be like all of these are things I want to do that are like kind of for selfish reasons for me. And it's difficult for me to do that kind of thing. So like I really, really want to take my wife on a vacation in London, because she is she's actually a history major, and her favorite era is Tudor era England, and I would want to see her face light up whenever she goes to like goes to the castle, goes to Buckingham Palace, or does the tour of the Tower of London, or she's going to be that kind of person where she's going to take me down some like seedy alley and be like, this is a place where this royal was like beheaded in like 1623, and I'll be like, cool, can we like not be here right now because this is terrifying. Yeah. And she's like, no, take my picture, and just seeing the joy on her face would be like one of the best things for me. So that's like probably pretty high up there for things I would want to do for someone else. For me personally, there's not a lot. Like I really enjoy a lot of the stuff that I've done throughout the years. I think like maybe going to visit a couple more countries would be cool, because I've really only ever been to like Canada and Ireland. So beyond that, like I would like to go do more like actual world exploration. So
it sounds like our wives would get along, because she pinned me down and we had to watch all of Reign, all of the Tudors, all that stuff. I think we're gonna go see Queen Elizabeth or Mary of Scots. I think it's
yeah.
Did you see
it? And The Favorite.
Yeah,
which is another one that's about the Queen. I can't remember which one, but like Queen Anne or something, and two of her servants trying to vie to be like the favorite handmaid or whatever.
Sure, yeah. Oh man, she loves. She has an obsession with Anne Burrell too, but
oh yeah,
not the cook from Food Network, but I think I said the name right. Is it Anne Burrell? I don't know.
Anne Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn, thank you. Yeah, I did say Anne Burrell. Oh boy. All right. Well, with that being said, that was Face the D20. You survived. How do you feel, sir?
I feel great.
Feel great. Awesome. It might have been the game, might have been the beer. I'm not sure, but we're going to go with great. But any upcoming, before I let you go, any upcoming projects you could spoil or tease for the group?
Upcoming projects. Let's see. We have for Starcity Games some newer stuff coming up. I think a lot of it has been mostly announced. We're moving to 4 commentators because we're going to be doing time-shifted matches. I'll be at the SCG Columbus event, which, if this is coming out when I think it's coming out, will be in just a couple of days. And I'll be monitoring that because we're also going to be doing a little bit more with our graphics. They're mostly going to look the same to people at home, but it's also been something where I've been working on it for the past like 3 months. And so it's going to be something where you're not going to notice too much of a difference, but it's something that I've been working really hard on. That's a big one. There is something that I can't quite talk about yet, but it'll be announced, I hope, sometime this month, in January, or it might be early next month. That is pretty exciting for me and the rest of the Commander Versus crew. And another big thing that is actually coming out, you should follow Director Kyle on Twitter. I believe he's going to have the scoop for this, at DIR Kyle West on Twitter. He, I believe, will be the one making the announcement about a new, really big, exciting thing for Commander Versus in the near future.
Awesome. Oh, wow. Yeah, that was a lot of teasing. That's great. A lot of upcoming stuff to look forward to from SUG, as always. Jeremy, Noell, thank you so much for joining us. Where can everyone find you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Noell, and pretty much all of my social media I've converted to this. So at Jeremy Noell on Twitch, twitch.tv/Jeremy Noell, youtube.com/Jeremy Noell, and you can find me on the Commanderverse series every Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern on the Starcity Games channel. And yeah, I think that's most of the places.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you again. You could find me on this very channel, They Said, We Said. You could also find me on Twitter at OrzovDunn. Head on over to the constructive criticism, constructivecriticism.com if you would like to hear this in podcast only form. So Spencer Howland does a great job hosting the Hive Mind over there exclusively. You could also check out Constructive Criticism podcast hosted by Spencer Howland with some great co-hosts, John Stern and Seth Manfield. Probably, if you know anything about Magic, you probably heard those names. But you could also go, like I said, go to cardsphere.com, the best place to buy, sell, trade your paper Magic the Gathering cards. Also to inkedgaming.com. You could enter promo code HiveMind MTG to get 10% off your order. You can find the custom play mats for the Hive Mind and 10th Street Hooligans. And then I want to thank our patrons, our new patrons since launching it last month. Thank you so much, Rafael Garcia, for that amazing question as well. So until next time, Planeswalkers, I will see you all in the multiverse.